What would you do if a stranger soaked by the
We don't have
rain,
anywhere
holding
else
a
to go.
hungry
Please, can
child,
you stay
walked into
here?
your
It's all
favorite
right.
diner
Come,
and
sit down.
quietly asked, "Sir, my son's hungry. Can we stay a while?" Would you look away or pull out a chair? Sometimes, the smallest act of kindness can change two lives forever. Before we go on, allow me to wish you peace and good health. Tell me from which country and at what time are you watching this story? Rain drifted across the windows of the Lantern Diner, blurring the neon sign until it looked like melted gold on the glass. Inside, the smell of coffee and fried onions hung in the air, wrapping around the handful of regulars who came here night after night. At the corner booth, beneath the humming light, Caleb Rhodes sat alone. He had ordered the same meal he always did, vegetable soup and a slice of bread, but what mattered wasn't the food. It was the second set of silverware laid neatly across from him, beside the untouched napkin and the empty chair. Every evening for 3 years, he saved that seat. He never said for whom everyone in town already knew. Ruby, the 60-year-old waitress with hair the color of silver dimes, came over with the coffee pot. "Refill, Caleb?" she asked softly. Her voice carried the kindness of someone who'd watched him age faster than time allowed. "Sure," he murmured, sliding his cup toward her. The steam rose between them, catching the faint reflection of his tired face. "You still saving her a seat, huh?" Ruby said it gently, the way one talks to someone tending a grave. Caleb's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Some habits die slow. Ruby nodded. Maybe the right company could help. He gave no answer, only reached for the salt shaker and stirred his soup, letting the silence settle. Beyond the fogged window, headlights carved brief streaks of light across the wet asphalt. The world kept moving. He just hadn't found a reason to follow it. When Ruby walked back to the counter, Caleb's gaze drifted to the empty chair again. He could almost see Emily sitting there, dark hair pulled into a bun, laughter soft and contagious, the faint scent of lavender from the nurse's scrub she used to wear. Sometimes, if the diner was quiet enough, he swore he could hear her say, "Eat while it's warm, love." He would look up, expecting her across from him, and instead meet only the reflection of a man who'd outlived the best part of himself. A bell rang faintly from the kitchen. Someone laughed. The normal sounds of life continued around him, but they felt far away, as if separated by glass. Caleb paid his bill, leaving a $5 tip always the same, never more, never less, and sat a while longer, hands folded on the table. He didn't notice Ruby watching from behind the counter, shaking her head with quiet sympathy. When the door opened, a draft of cold rain swept through the diner. The bell above it jingled, sharp and clear. Caleb turned his head automatically, half out of habit, half out of hope that never quite died. The gust carried the scent of wet asphalt and pine and 2 strangers. A woman stepped in first, her coat soaked, her hair clinging to her cheeks. Behind her, a little boy no older than 6 held tightly to her hand. The child's shoes squished with each step, water dripping onto the checkered floor. The boy looked around with wide, uncertain eyes before his gaze landed on Caleb's corner booth. The woman's voice trembled when she spoke to Ruby at the counter. "I'm sorry to ask. My son's hungry. Could we stay a while? Just to warm up?" Ruby hesitated, glancing toward Caleb. The diner was almost full except, of course, for that single empty chair. Caleb watched them, 2 silhouettes dripping water onto the floor, shivering under the harsh diner lights. Something inside him stirred, a small flicker he hadn't felt in years. He rose halfway from his seat and called softly, "There's room here." The woman hesitated. Her eyes were tired, the kind that had forgotten rest. "Oh, we don't want to bother you," she said quickly. "You wouldn't," Caleb replied, pulling out the empty chair. His hand shook just slightly, but he managed a kind smile. No one should eat alone tonight. For a moment, the woman seemed unsure whether to trust him. Then she nodded, guiding her son forward. The boy climbed into the seat across from Caleb, legs dangling. His small voice carried more manners than his age. "Thank you, mister." Caleb felt something warm press against his chest. "You're welcome, buddy." Ruby approached with her pad. "Same soup, Caleb?" "2 more," he said, then looked at the boy. "And maybe a grilled cheese for this one. Hot chocolate, too." The woman blinked in surprise. "Sir, please?" He shook his head. "Name's Caleb, and it's fine." She swallowed hard. "I'm Hannah," she said quietly. "This is Noah." The name sat gently in the air, simple but full of weight. Caleb noticed the torn edge of Hannah's sleeve, the thin fabric clinging to her wrist. He saw the hunger she tried to hide, the way she glanced at her son before herself. When the food came, Noah's eyes lit up like a lamp. "Mom, look, it's got cheese that melts," he said, voice full of wonder. Hannah smiled, a fragile curve that trembled at the corners. She tried to eat slowly, as if pretending this was just another normal night. But Caleb saw her hands shake each time she lifted the spoon. He didn't ask questions. Some stories were too raw for strangers to touch. Instead, he said quietly, "Cold night." She nodded. "Been colder." The conversation drifted in and out, carried by the rhythm of the rain tapping the window. Outside, the world was gray and blurred, but at their small table, there was warmth steam rising from soup bowls, the gentle scrape of spoons, a boy's laughter echoing softly. Caleb couldn't help glancing at the empty chair beside him, the one that used to belong to Emily. Tonight, for the first time, it wasn't empty. It held coats and mittens and a little boy's smile reflected in the window glass. The ache in his chest loosened, replaced by something unfamiliar yet peaceful. When they finished, Hannah tried to protest as he paid for the meal, her voice almost breaking. "We'll pay you back somehow." Caleb met her gaze and said, "You already did." She frowned slightly. "How?" He looked at the boy, who was licking the last bit of chocolate from his cup. "You reminded me why I'm still here." They sat for a while longer, not saying much. Outside, the rain eased into a mist. The neon sign flickered softly against the wet glass, painting them in gold. When Hannah finally stood, she said quietly, "Thank you, Caleb. Really." He nodded. "Drive safe." Her lips parted as if to speak, then closed again. She only smiled, tired but sincere, before leading Noah to the door. The bell jingled, the cold air rushed in, and then they were gone, two shadows fading into the night. Caleb stared at the chair across from him, still warm from where the boy had Saturday. For the first time in years, it didn't look like a shrine. It looked like an invitation. He glanced toward Ruby at the counter. She caught his eye, smiled knowingly, and went back to pouring coffee for a trucker by the window. Caleb finished the last sip of his soup, slipped on his jacket, and looked once more at that chair. The rain outside had stopped, leaving the streets shining under the streetlights. He thought of Emily, her laughter, her kindness, the way she'd never let anyone eat alone. He whispered, almost to himself, "Guess you were right." Then he turned toward the door. The bell chimed softly, and the night swallowed him up, carrying the quiet echo of his wife's voice and the memory of a shared meal that had made the empty chair feel full again. The morning after the storm, the streets of Maplewood shimmered with puddles reflecting the pale sky. The Lantern Diner was quieter than usual. The radio hummed an old Sinatra tune, and Ruby wiped the counter with the same cloth she'd been using for years. When the door opened, Caleb Rhodes stepped in, raincoat draped over his arm, boots carrying the smell of wet gravel. He nodded at Ruby, as he always did. "Morning." "Morning, Caleb, you're early." He shrugged. "Didn't sleep much." She poured him coffee, strong and black, and leaned an elbow on the counter. "That lady and her boy. Did you know them?" "No." He stirred his cup. "Never seen 'em before." Ruby raised an eyebrow. "You do a kind thing, letting strangers sit with you. Not many folks around here would have done that." Caleb took a slow sip. Didn't feel like kindness, just felt right. He didn't mention that he'd driven home the night before thinking about the boy's smile, or that he'd stood in his kitchen staring at the photo of Emily, wondering if she'd been proud of him for once. The house had felt less empty somehow, as if her laughter had followed him there. Outside, the clouds had finally begun to break. The streets were busy with the sounds of small-town life delivery trucks, rumbling, shop doors unlocking, the distant whistle of a train heading west. Caleb finished his coffee and stood to leave when the bell above the door jingled again. This time, it was them, Hannah and Noah. The boy's jacket was still too thin for the chill, his sneakers scuffed, but his face brightened the moment he saw Caleb. "Hey, mister," Noah called out, waving. Caleb blinked, surprised. "Well, look who's up early." Hannah smiled shyly, holding a folded piece of paper. "We came to say thank you. You didn't have to do what you did last night." "I didn't mind," Caleb said. "You two get home safe?" She hesitated. We slept in the car. It was warmer after the rain stopped." M. Something in him tightened. You're still staying out there? Just for now. I've been looking for work. It's hard without an address. She offered the paper with trembling fingers. It's a list of places hiring. I circled a few. Caleb took the paper, scanning the names: laundromat, grocery store, the gas station off Route 12. None paid enough for a motel, let alone a home. You try the shelter on Elm? He asked. It's full most nights, she said softly. And Noah doesn't sleep well around strangers. The boy tugged her sleeve. Mom, can I get pancakes? Hannah smiled, embarrassed. We can't today, sweetie. Maybe later. Ruby, standing nearby, caught Caleb's eye and mouthed silently. Go on. He sighed and nodded toward a booth. Sit. I'll get him pancakes. You can have coffee. Hannah looked as if she might refuse, pride stiff in her posture, but then she saw the way Noah's eyes lit up, and she gave in. Just this once, she said. Caleb smiled faintly. That's what I said last night. Ruby brought a plate of pancakes, steam curling upward like a promise. The sweet smell filled the air, and Noah leaned forward, eyes wide. They smell so good! Eat slow, champ, Caleb said with a small grin. They taste better that way. Hannah wrapped her hands around the coffee mug, holding it as if it were a tiny fire she didn't want to lose. She took a careful sip and exhaled softly. We were in Portland for a while, she said after a pause. My husband, he wasn't a good man. We left in a hurry. Caleb nodded, not pressing for details. The look in her eyes said enough fear, exhaustion, shame she shouldn't have to carry. You got any family around here? She shook her head. No one left. My mom passed 2 years ago. After that, it was just us. Noah spoke with a mouthful of syrup. Mom says we're a team. Caleb smiled. That's a good team to have. Hannah looked down, her voice barely a whisper. Some days, I just hope I can keep it together for him. Caleb thought of Emily again, the way she'd always found light in dark places. He glanced at the paper Hannah had given him. Half those places wouldn't hire anyone without a reference or an address. He sighed. You said you've done restaurant work before. Yes. Waitressing mostly. Cleaning. I'll take anything. He hesitated, then said slowly. My buddy runs a bakery down on Pine Street, Calder's Corner. He's always looking for help. Early hours, good man. Her eyes widened. You'd ask him for me? I can try. Hannah's throat tightened. Why are you doing this? Caleb looked at her for a long moment before answering. Because someone should have helped me once and didn't. For a while, they sat in silence. Ruby refilled their cups, humming softly to an old country tune on the radio. Outside, sunlight broke through the clouds, spilling across the street in patches of gold. Noah finished his pancakes and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. That was the best breakfast ever. He leaned toward Caleb. Thank you, Mr. Caleb. The man chuckled. Anytime, kiddo. When they stood to leave, Hannah reached into her coat pocket and placed 2 crumpled dollar bills on the table. Please, let me pay something. Caleb pushed the money back toward her. Buy him a warmer coat instead. She wanted to argue, but couldn't find the words. Her eyes glistened, and she nodded. We'll find a way to thank you someday. Caleb shook his head. You already did. Outside, the street sparkled with melting snow. Hannah took Noah's hand, and they walked toward a parked car that had seen better years. The boy turned and waved before climbing in. Ruby approached quietly, carrying Caleb's check. You know, you're not fooling anyone, she teased. He frowned. What do you mean? You're pretending this isn't changing you, she said gently. But it is. Caleb looked out the window, watching Hannah's car pull away. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. Ruby smiled, tapping his shoulder. About time, Honorable. When he left the diner, the sky was clear for the first time in days. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through old numbers until he found one labeled Tommy Bakery. For a moment, he hesitated. Then he pressed call. The line rang twice before a voice answered, cheerful and rough. Calder's Corner Bakery. Caleb took a breath. Hey, Tommy, you still hiring? Always. Why? I think I found someone who deserves a chance. And as he hung up, Caleb felt something shift inside him. Small, quiet, but real. The kind of change that starts with one good meal and ends with a life no longer lived alone. That night, when he passed the Lantern Diner, he slowed his truck just long enough to see the glow through the window. He thought of the empty chair again, but this time, it didn't feel empty at all. It felt like it was waiting for something good to return. The next morning came with a dull sky, the kind that promised more rain before noon. Caleb parked his truck outside Calder's Corner Bakery, its brick walls still damp from the night mist. Through the window, he could see Tommy Calder kneading dough behind the counter, radio humming faintly from a shelf above the ovens. The smell of cinnamon rolls filled the air sweet, comforting, like something from a life Caleb had almost forgotten. Tommy looked up when the bell above the door jingled. "Well, I'll be Caleb Rhodes. Haven't seen you in forever." Caleb grinned faintly. "Been around. That garage keeping you busy?" "Enough." Caleb hesitated before continuing. "You still hiring help? Maybe mornings?" Tommy leaned against the counter, dusting flour off his hands. "Depends who's asking." "Not me," Caleb said. "It's for someone else. A woman, Hannah Lee, has a little boy. She's worked diners, cleans well, good manners, just fell on hard times." Tommy's expression softened. "You vouch for her?" "I do." "Well," Tommy said, pulling out a notepad. "Tell her to show up at 5 a.m. tomorrow. We start early here, and I don't go easy on anyone. Not even the nice ones." Caleb chuckled. "That's fair." When he left the bakery, the air smelled of rain and bread. He climbed into his truck, staring through the windshield as drops began to fall again, slow and heavy. He didn't know why helping Hannah mattered so much, only that it did. Maybe because it made him feel closer to the man Emily had once believed he could be. Later that afternoon, he found Hannah's car parked near the edge of town, close to the old train tracks. She was sitting inside with Noah, reading from a picture book. The boy's laughter carried faintly through the cracked window, a sound too pure for the gray day. Caleb knocked gently on the glass. Hannah startled, then rolled it down halfway. "Caleb? Is everything okay?" He nodded. "Yeah, I talked to my friend at the bakery. He'll give you a shot 5 a.m. tomorrow." Her eyes widened. "You did that for me?" "Don't thank me yet," he said. "It's early work. Hard but good pay. You'll need to be there before sunrise." She looked down at her lap. "We can manage." Caleb glanced at the back seat blankets, a backpack, a few empty snack wrappers. The car smelled faintly of rain and exhaustion. He swallowed. "You shouldn't have to manage in this." She frowned. "It's temporary." He nodded slowly. "Maybe, but there's a better place for now." Her brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, then said, "I've got an old apartment. Haven't used it in years. It's sitting empty, paid for, and collecting dust. It's not much, but it's safe, and it's warm." Her shoulders stiffened. "I can't take charity." Caleb shook his head. "Then don't. Call it a trade. You keep it clean. Make it feel lived in again. I haven't been able to set foot in there since—" His voice trailed off. "Since my wife passed." Hannah's eyes softened. "Caleb, I don't know what to say." He gave a small, tired smile. "You don't have to say anything. Just say yes." Outside, thunder rolled faintly in the distance, the kind that comes before another long rain. Noah climbed between the seats, curious. "Mom? Who's this?" "This is Mr. Caleb," she said, brushing a hand through his hair. "He's the man from the diner." The boy smiled. "You're nice. You bought me pancakes." Caleb laughed quietly. "That's me, the pancake guy." Hannah looked out the windshield, torn between pride and fear. "I can't let you do this," she said. "People would talk." Caleb's tone softened, almost pleading. "Let them. People talk no matter what. But you'll freeze in this car." She turned toward him then, truly looking at him, the weathered lines on his face, the faint tremor in his hands, the kind eyes that carried both pain and patience. And for the first time she nodded. "Okay. Just for a while." Caleb exhaled, relief mixed with something gentler, something almost like gratitude. "Come on then. Follow me." The rain began again as they drove through the narrow streets of Maplewood, the wipers squeaking across the windshield in tired rhythm. Hannah's car followed close behind Caleb's old pickup truck, its headlights reflected in every puddle. The town was quiet at this hour, storefronts shuttered, porch lights flickering to life one by one. When they turned onto Cedar Lane, the road narrowed to a row of old apartment buildings tucked between a church and a laundromat. Caleb parked by a rusted mailbox marked Pineview Apartments. He stepped out, pulling up his collar against the drizzle, and waved Hannah over. "It's on the second floor," he said. "Stairs creak a bit, but they're solid." She followed him up the narrow stairwell, Noah trailing behind, clutching a small stuffed bear that had lost an ear. Caleb unlocked the door, the old brass key turning with a soft click. When the door swung open, a faint smell of dust and cedar drifted out, familiar, bittersweet. He flipped on the light. The room glowed softly, yellow and gentle. The apartment was small. One bedroom, a worn sofa, a kitchen with old linoleum floors. Everything was neat, untouched, as if frozen in time. A few picture frames lined the wall, their edges dulled by dust. Hannah stepped inside cautiously, her breath catching. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It's just old," Caleb replied, brushing a layer of dust from the counter. "But it'll keep you dry. Heat works, water's hot. There's soup and crackers in the cabinet." Noah ran straight to the couch and bounced once before collapsing into a giggle. "Mom, it's soft." Hannah turned in a slow circle, taking it all in: the faded curtains, the ticking wall clock, the faint hum of the refrigerator. Her voice was quiet. "Are you sure about this, Caleb?" He nodded. "I've been paying rent on a ghost for years. Feels right that someone finally lives here again." She bit her lip. "We can't pay you." "I'm not asking for money," he said gently. "Just keep it clean. Make it feel like a home again." Hannah's eyes shimmered. "Why are you doing this for us?" Caleb hesitated, his gaze fixed on the picture frames above the mantel. "Because 3 years ago, when Emily died, I stood in a hospital parking lot at 2 a.m. with a baby who wouldn't stop crying and no idea what came next. And a nurse, a stranger, gave me her number. Said I could call any time. I did, more times than I can count." He swallowed hard. "She saved me. I never got to thank her. Maybe this is how I pay it forward." The room went quiet except for the steady ticking of the clock. Hannah looked down, blinking away tears. "That's more kindness than I know what to do with." Caleb smiled faintly. "Then start with dinner. There's soup in the cabinet." She laughed through the tears. "We'll make it tomorrow. You've done enough for one night." Noah, now curled under a blanket, was already drifting to sleep. Hannah knelt to brush the damp hair from his forehead. Caleb watched her for a moment, then looked around the apartment, the space that had been silent for so long now, filled with the small sounds of life again. The click of the heater, a child's breathing, the rustle of fabric. Hannah stood and turned toward him. "Thank you, Caleb. Really." He nodded, stepping back toward the door. "Get some rest. I'll bring groceries in the morning." When he closed the door behind him, the hallway seemed strangely bright. He stood there a moment, hands still on the knob, listening to the faint hum of warmth inside. Outside, the rain had stopped. The air smelled of wet earth and wood smoke from a nearby chimney. Caleb looked up at the cloudy sky, his breath visible in the cool night. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like he was walking away from a memory. As he climbed into his truck, he glanced back at the lit window on the second floor. Through the curtains, he saw a shadow Hannah moving about, tucking the blanket around her son. Light spilled into the street, soft and golden, like a promise. He smiled to himself and whispered, "Good night, Emily." Then he drove off slowly through the sleeping town, headlights cutting through the mist, carrying with him the quiet feeling that maybe, just maybe, he'd done something right. Morning sunlight crept through the thin curtains, painting soft stripes across the small apartment. The air smelled faintly of coffee and toast, the first real breakfast Hannah had made in weeks. Noah sat cross-legged on the couch, humming to himself while drawing superheroes on the back of an old envelope. Caleb had stopped by early, as promised, a paper bag of groceries in one hand and 2 mugs of coffee in the other. "Brought the essentials," he said, setting the bag on the counter. "Bread, milk, and a few things for dinner." Hannah smiled. "You didn't have to." "I know," he interrupted gently, "but I wanted to." He looked around the room, now a little more alive. The window was open, just a crack. The scent of rain, washed streets drifted in. A small towel hung to dry near the stove. The old place had warmth again, something it hadn't had in years. "Tommy said you did fine this morning," Caleb said, sipping his coffee. "Said you were early, polite, worked hard." Hannah laughed softly. "He's kind. I'm slow at the register, though. I kept pressing the wrong buttons. He'll get over it. He likes people who try." Their conversation was easy, unhurried. But beneath it lingered something else. A quiet awareness neither wanted to name. Caleb noticed how the morning light caught the strands of Hannah's hair, how her smile didn't reach her eyes yet but was trying to. Hannah, meanwhile, saw in him a steadiness she hadn't seen in years, a man who listened more than he spoke. Noah looked up from his drawing. "Mr. Caleb, do you like superheroes?" Caleb smiled. "Used to, when I was your age." "Why?" "Because I'm drawing one that saves people from fires. Mom says heroes come in all sizes." Caleb's smile faltered just slightly, his gaze dropping to the burn scar on his left hand. "She's right about that," he murmured. Hannah noticed the scar. "That from your old job?" He nodded. "Restaurant fire? Long time ago. Everyone got out. Lucky night." Sounds like something a hero would say." He shook his head. "Heroes don't think they just move. I just moved." The clock ticked quietly between them. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Caleb set down his mug. "I should fix that heater valve before it gives out." He crouched near the wall, fiddling with the old unit. Hannah leaned against the counter, watching him work, still amazed at the turn her life had taken. Just days ago, she'd been shivering in a car, praying for warmth. Now she was here safe, fed, her son laughing in the next room. When Caleb stood, dusting his hands, Noah tugged at his sleeve. "Can we show him the picture, Mom?" "What picture?" Caleb asked, smiling. "The one on the wall," Noah said, pointing to the hallway. "Mom was looking at it before you came." Caleb frowned slightly and followed the boy into the hall. There, beside the bedroom door, hung an old framed photograph. A woman in nurse's scrubs, smiling brightly, sunlight glinting off the hospital badge on her chest. The frame tilted a little to one side, the glass slightly fogged with time. Noah grinned. "She's pretty, huh?" Caleb's throat tightened. "Yeah," he said quietly. "She was." Hannah approached slowly. "Is that your wife?" He nodded once, unable to find his voice. Hannah stared at the photo, her eyes widened, then fixed on the name printed on the badge. "Emily Rhodes, RN." Her breath caught. "Oh my God!" Caleb turned to her. "What is it?" Hannah stepped closer, fingertips trembling as they brushed the edge of the frame. I've seen her before," she whispered. "Years ago." Caleb frowned. "Where?" Her voice broke. "At County General Hospital. My mother had a stroke. I was 19, terrified. And this nurse, your wife, she stayed with me all night. She held my hand while they tried to save Mom. She wouldn't leave until it was over." Caleb's breath hitched. The room seemed to shrink around them, the air thick with memories. "You're sure it was her?" "Yes," Hannah said, tears filling her eyes. "I never forgot her face. She talked about her husband, said he worked with engines, that they'd just moved here. I remembered because she said, 'He's the reason I still believe in good people.'" "M?" Caleb staggered back a step, one hand gripping the doorframe. The picture blurred before his eyes. Emily had told him once about a young woman who'd lost her mother that year, about how she couldn't walk away after her shift. "She said you were just a kid," he whispered. "A brave one." Hannah covered her mouth, a sob escaping. "She saved me that night. I never got to thank her." Caleb looked at the photo again, voice rough. "And now, 10 years later, I bring her back to the same apartment she used to love." For a long moment, they stood there in silence. Two lives suddenly connected by threads neither had seen before. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The soft ticking of the wall clock filled the silence, blending with Noah's faint humming from the next room. Caleb stood still, staring at the photograph. Emily's smile frozen in time, her eyes bright with the same warmth that had once filled every room she entered. "I can't believe this," Hannah whispered. "All these years I thought I'd never see her again, and now—" Her voice cracked. "Now I'm standing in her home." Caleb's eyes glistened, but his voice was steady. "She would have liked that. She always said kindness circles back, one way or another." Hannah turned toward him. "Do you believe that?" He hesitated, then exhaled slowly. "I didn't. Not for a long time. After she passed, I stopped believing in a lot of things." Hannah took a step closer. "Then maybe this is her way of reminding you." Caleb let out a quiet laugh that sounded more like a sigh. "She'd do something like that." He looked back at the photo and shook his head. "You know, I used to ask her how she could stand seeing so much pain at work. She'd tell me, Because sometimes you get to see healing too.
I guess I just forgot what that looked like.
Noah appeared in the doorway then, his small hand clutching the hem of his mother's sweater.
Mom, why are you crying?
Hannah knelt and hugged him close. They're happy tears, sweetheart. I just remembered someone very kind. The boy turned to Caleb. Was she your wife? Caleb nodded gently. Yeah, buddy. She was. Noah's eyes widened. Then she's like an angle now, right? Caleb swallowed hard, the corners of his mouth twitching upward. Yeah, exactly like that. Noah smiled, satisfied, and wandered back to his drawing. For a while, Hannah and Caleb just stood there, two people bound by a kindness given years ago, standing in the quiet glow of the woman who had connected them. Hannah wiped her eyes. When I left Portland, I kept praying someone would help us. Just one person. I never imagined it would lead me here to her husband. Caleb's voice softened. Maybe that's how faith works. You don't see the road until you're already walking it. She gave a small, tearful laugh. You sound like her. Guess I learned from the best. He sat down on the worn sofa, elbows on his knees, staring at his scarred hands. When Emily died, I thought I'd lost the part of me that cared about people. I stopped talking to neighbors, stopped smiling at strangers. Coming home every night to silence, it eats at you. But last night, watching Noah laugh, it was like hearing her laugh again. Hannah sat across from him, hands folded in her lap. Maybe she sent us to remind you. He looked up, meeting her eyes. Or maybe she sent me to remind you. The words hung between them, soft but heavy. Hannah blinked, tears slipping down her cheeks. You think she'd be proud of this? Caleb smiled faintly. She'd be proud of both of us. Em? Noah's laughter carried from the other room, bright and unguarded. The sound filled the small apartment, spilling into corners long kept quiet. Hannah stood and walked to the window, brushing the curtain aside. Outside, the rain had finally stopped. The street below shimmered with puddles, reflecting the last light of day. Caleb joined her, standing a step behind. For the first time in 3 years, he felt the heaviness in his chest begin to lift, not gone, but lighter. She believed in signs, Caleb said softly. Said the universe connects people who need each other. Hannah smiled, her voice barely above a whisper. Then I guess the universe got it right. They stood there in silence as twilight deepened, the photo of Emily glowing faintly in the golden light. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell rang 6 times. The sound rolled through the quiet streets of Maplewood, soft and solemn, like a benediction. When Caleb finally spoke, his voice trembled with something close to peace. Maybe healing isn't about moving on, he said. Maybe it's about letting someone else keep the kindness going. Hannah nodded. Then we'll keep it going. Outside, the clouds began to break, and a single beam of sunlight slipped through, touching the picture frame on the wall. Emily's smile seemed almost alive in its glow, a silent witness to the kindness she had started, now continuing through the 2 people she had unknowingly joined. And in that quiet, golden room, the chain of compassion began again. The smell of yeast and sugar hit Hannah the moment she stepped inside Calder's Corner Bakery. The warmth of the ovens met the chill of the early morning air, and for the first time in months, she didn't feel cold. It was still dark outside, just before 5, and the street lamps threw long amber lines across the wet pavement. Tommy Calder, a big man with a red beard and an easy grin, looked up from behind the counter. You must be Hannah, he said, wiping flour from his hands. Caleb told me you'd show up early. Didn't say you'd be this early. I didn't want to be late, Hannah said, pushing a strand of hair behind her ear. Tommy chuckled. Good answer. Let's get you started. Oh. The bakery was alive, with small noises, the hiss of steam, the clatter of pans, the steady rhythm of kneading dough. Hannah tied on an apron and followed Tommy's directions carefully. Keep the cinnamon rolls in that tray, pies on the lower shelf, and don't be shy with the flour, he said. Flour's the baker's armor. She smiled, repeating the phrase under her breath. It felt strange, using her hands for something other than worry. By 6:30, the first customers started to trickle in. Mail carriers, tired office workers, an elderly couple who came every Wednesday for the same apple tart. Hannah greeted each one, shy but polite, her voice soft yet steady. The cash register still made her nervous, but every time she pressed the wrong button, Tommy's good-natured laugh filled the air instead of scolding. Around 7, Caleb appeared at the door, his work jacket dusted with early morning dew. He didn't step inside right away, just stood watching for a moment as Hannah boxed pastries for a customer, her movements careful and precise. He saw something in her posture, something that reminded him of Emily, the quiet pride of someone trying to rebuild piece by piece. Tommy spotted him and waved. "Hey, Rhodes, you coming in for coffee or just lurking like a guardian angel?" Caleb laughed and stepped forward. "Coffee, and maybe a blueberry muffin." Hannah looked up, surprised but smiling. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep," he said. "Wanted to see how the new hire was doing." "She hasn't burned the place down," Tommy said. "So I'd call that a win." Caleb grinned, taking the steaming cup Tommy offered. "Told you she'd fit in." As he sipped, he caught Hannah's eye. "How's it feel to be back on your feet?" She thought for a moment. "Like I'm remembering who I used to be." He nodded. "That's a good start." By the time the morning rush was over, the bakery smelled like heaven, warm butter, cinnamon, and fresh coffee. Hannah leaned against the counter, exhausted but glowing. Tommy handed her a small paper bag. "Take this home," he said. "First day tradition." She peeked inside and laughed. "2 loaves of bread and 1 pie," he added. "No one should leave empty-handed after their first honest day's work." When Caleb offered her a ride back, she hesitated. "You've done enough already." He shrugged. "It's on my way." The drive back to Pineview Apartments was quiet but easy, filled with the smell of warm bread. Noah was waiting at the window when they arrived, his face lighting up when he saw the bag in his mother's hands. "Mom, did you bake all that?" "With a little help," she said, ruffling his hair. Caleb smiled. "Looks like you got yourself a chef." Noah looked thoughtful. "You bake too, Mr. Caleb?" "Only when I'm desperate," he joked. The boy laughed, then took the bag eagerly, running to the kitchen. Hannah stood in the doorway, watching him tear into the bread with a joy that made her eyes sting. Caleb lingered by the door. "You did good today," he said softly. She turned, a shy smile spreading across her face. "It's been a long time since anyone told me that." He tipped his cap. "Get used to it." When he left, the sun had just begun to break through the clouds, bathing the street in gold. Hannah stood by the window, clutching the still warm loaf in her hands, watching his truck disappear around the corner. And for the first time in a long while, the world didn't feel so impossible. The next afternoon was bright and windless, the kind of day when Maplewood smelled faintly of pine and baking bread. Caleb was at the garage, finishing an oil change, when he heard small footsteps and the familiar sound of a child trying to open the heavy door. "Mr. Caleb?" He turned to see Noah standing there, holding a small paper bag almost as big as his chest. The boy's cheeks were flushed from the walk, his hair sticking out beneath a wool cap. "Well, if it isn't my favorite superhero," Caleb said, wiping his hands with a rag. "What have you got there?" Noah held the bag higher, beaming. "Mom made this for you. She said to tell you thank you for helping her get the job." Caleb knelt down. "Did she now? What's inside?" "Apple pie," the boy said proudly. "She said it's the best one she ever baked." Caleb took the warm bag, the buttery scent escaping as he opened it. He broke off a small piece, steam curling upward. The first bite stopped him mid-breath. The taste cinnamon, a little too much sugar, and a flaky crust pulled him backward through time. He was in his kitchen again, 3 years ago. Emily at the counter, hair messy, laughing, as she tried to copy his grandmother's recipe. "Too much sugar?" she'd asked. He'd said never enough. They'd eaten the whole pie before it even cooled. Now, kneeling on the concrete floor of the garage, Caleb chewed slowly, eyes stinging. "It's perfect," he said softly. "Tell your mom she's got real talent." Noah grinned, proud of the compliment. "She'll be so happy," she said. "Baking makes her heart calm." Caleb smiled faintly. "Yeah, I know that feeling." He stood and ruffled the boy's hair. "You want to ride home? It's a long walk." Noah nodded eagerly, and they climbed into the old truck. The engine rumbled to life, humming like something familiar and steady. As they drove through town, the afternoon light filtered through the tall oaks lining the street. "You know," Caleb said, glancing at the boy, "your mom's a brave lady." "I know," Noah replied matter-of-factly. "She always says brave doesn't mean not scared. It means you keep going anyway." Caleb chuckled. "Smart kid." I get it from Mom, Noah said proudly. When they pulled up to Pineview, Hannah was waiting by the steps. Her apron was dusted with flour, and she looked tired, but happy. Noah, she called. You didn't walk all the way. Oh, Mr. Caleb, you brought him back. Couldn't let my delivery man do all the work, he said, climbing out. He handed her the empty bag. Best pie I've had in years. Her eyes softened. That means a lot. I was nervous. You shouldn't be. You've got something special there. She smiled. Really smiled, this time. The kind that reached her eyes. Maybe I finally found what I'm good at. You did, Caleb said quietly. And it suits you. For a few seconds, they just stood there in the mild afternoon light, neither rushing to fill the silence. Somewhere nearby, a church bell struck 4 times, its sound mellow and comforting. Noah tugged his mother's sleeve. Mom, can I draw another superhero? This time he can bake and fix cars? Hannah laughed, glancing at Caleb. Sounds like the perfect hero, he grinned. I'll take the job. She shook her head fondly. Thank you, Caleb, for everything. He met her gaze. You don't owe me thanks. Just keep baking. When he drove away, Hannah stood at the window, watching his truck disappear again into the sunlight. Inside the kitchen, the smell of sugar and butter lingered in the air. She looked at Noah, already sketching with his tongue sticking out in concentration, and whispered, We're going to be okay, sweetheart. We're really going to be okay. Meanwhile, Caleb reached home and set the last piece of pie on the table beside the familiar empty chair. For the first time, it didn't make him ache. The seat across from him no longer represented loss, it represented connection. He raised his coffee mug slightly toward the photograph of Emily on the wall. You'd like her, he said softly. She's got your heart. Then he took another slow bite of pie, the sunlight spilling through the window, and let the taste remind him that healing sometimes comes one warm meal and one kind act at a time. By early spring, Maplewood had traded its frost for sunlight. Daffodils bloomed along the sidewalks, and the smell of cinnamon and yeast from Calder's Corner Bakery drifted all the way to the garage across the street. Business was steady for both places, and every morning, Caleb would wave through the bakery window as Hannah tied her apron and flipped the open sign. The routine felt peaceful, predictable, healing. But small towns have long memories and short tongues, and in Maplewood, gossip traveled faster than the morning mail. It started innocently enough. Mrs. Patterson from the next building spotted Caleb helping Hannah carry flour sacks inside one afternoon. She mentioned it to Mrs. Kim at the grocery store. By the weekend, the story had grown wings. You know that mechanic Caleb Rhodes? The widower? Yes, dear. The one who always eats alone? Well, not anymore. He's been spending an awful lot of time with that young single mother from the bakery. Oh my, poor man. She's probably after his money. By the time Hannah heard it, the words had traveled through 4 different mouths and gathered venom along the way. She stood behind the counter that Monday morning, wiping at the spotless display case as Tommy chatted with a customer. She tried to ignore the pair of women whispering near the window, but it was impossible not to hear snippets. Moved into his old apartment, I heard. Too fast, if you ask me. And with that child, such a shame. The heat rose in her chest. She didn't look up until they left, the bell above the door jingling behind them. Tommy frowned. Ignore 'em. They've been bored since the library closed for renovations. Hannah forced a smile. I'm fine. But she wasn't. Every whisper, every side glance felt like a reminder that she was still the outsider, the girl with no past people could vouch for. That afternoon, she stepped out to deliver an order to the diner. Caleb was across the street, crouched beside a pickup truck, his hands deep in the engine. When he saw her, he stood, wiping his palms on a rag. You okay? He asked, noticing the tightness in her face. She hesitated. Have you heard what people are saying? He shrugged. People always talk, especially when they don't understand something. It's different this time, she said quietly. They're saying I'm using you. Caleb's jaw tightened. Let them say it. I know the truth. But your reputation. He cut her off gently. You think I care about that? Before you came, my reputation was the lonely mechanic who eats the same sandwich every day. I'll take the upgrade. Hannah blinked back a tear, half a laugh escaping her. You always know what to say. Just telling the truth. He leaned against the hood, watching the sunlight bounce off the chrome. You can't stop gossip, Hannah. But you can outlive it. You keep doing what you're doing. People will figure out who you are. I'm Sabin. She nodded, but her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. I just don't want to cause trouble for you. He looked across the street at the bakery, where Noah's drawing of a superhero still hung proudly in the window. You're not causing trouble. You're building something. And around here, that's what scares people most, someone finding happiness when they've already decided they can't. The words sank deep. Later that evening, Hannah walked Noah to the park while Caleb locked up the garage. The sky burned orange behind the church steeple. The boy ran ahead, chasing his shadow across the grass. Mom, look, he called, holding up a dandelion. If I blow on it and make a wish, does it come true? Sometimes, she said, smiling. What will you wish for? He thought for a moment, eyes squeezed shut. That nobody talks mean about you anymore. Hannah's throat tightened. She crouched beside him, brushing his hair back. That's a good wish, baby. From a few yards away, Caleb watched them, the small boy, the woman with sunlight in her hair, the way laughter softened the air around them. He'd heard whispers too, of course. A customer had mentioned them offhand that morning. But as he watched Hannah lift Noah into her arms and spin him until they both fell laughing into the grass, Caleb realized something simple and unshakable. He didn't need the town's approval. For the first time since Emily's death, he wasn't looking for permission to live again. He was simply doing it. 2 days later, the gossip found its way into the garage. It came dressed as casual talk, carried by a man in a suit whose car needed nothing more than a quick oil change. Caleb was under the hood, focused, when the customer leaned against the counter and said, "Heard you've been keeping busy, Rhodes. That woman from the bakery pretty thing, isn't she?" Caleb didn't look up. "She's got talent. Works hard." The man chuckled. "Yeah, I'm sure she does. Just be careful, friend. Folks like that, they see a good man and know where to land." Caleb straightened slowly, wiping his hands on a rag. His tone stayed calm, but his eyes had sharpened. "Folks like what, exactly?" The man shifted. "You know what I mean. Single mothers, rough pasts. Can't blame them for. That's enough." The garage went still. Caleb's voice was low, but carried the weight of something that didn't allow argument. "You came here for an oil change, not to insult good people who've already been through enough." The man raised his hands. "Hey, no offense meant." "Then stop talking before you mean some." There was a long pause. The customer muttered something about being late, dropped a few bills on the counter, and left without another word. Caleb stood there for a moment, breathing hard, the rag twisting in his hand. He hadn't realized how deep the anger ran, not just at the man's words, but at the way they echoed years of quiet cruelty he'd seen in others, the kind that hid behind politeness. That evening, he crossed the street to the bakery. The closed sign was already up, but Hannah was still inside, wiping down tables. The smell of cinnamon hung in the warm air. "You should have gone home an hour ago," he said through the open door. She smiled tiredly. "Wanted to make sure everything's perfect for tomorrow." The church group ordered pies. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "I heard more talk today." Her hands froze on the rag. "Of course you did. I told them to stop." She looked up sharply. "You didn't have to." "I did." Hannah sighed, lowering her head. "They'll just twist it. Say you're defending me because it's true." "Let them. Truth doesn't need defending from lies. It just needs time." M6. She stared at him, her eyes wet but steady. "How do you do that? Stay calm when people are cruel?" He thought for a moment. "Because Emily used to tell me something. Don't let small people make you smaller. Took me years to understand that. Now I do." Hannah smiled faintly, the corners of her mouth trembling. "I wish I'd known her." "You have," he said softly. "Every time you bake something for someone who can't pay, every time you smile when it's easier to hide, you remind me of her." "Oh." Her breath caught. "Caleb." He stepped closer, not too close, but enough for his voice to soften. "You and Noah gave me back a piece of life I thought I'd buried. The town can talk all they want. I'm done living in silence." The words hung there, gentle and true. For a long moment, neither moved. The air between them carried the scent of sugar, flour, and something unspoken hope, fragile but growing. Outside, the street was quiet, except for the faint hum of the diner's neon sign across the road. A few late customers walked past, glancing in, their curiosity pressed against the glass. Caleb didn't care. He turned to go, hand resting on the door. "See you tomorrow, Hannah." Her voice followed him softly. "Good night, Caleb. And thank you." He looked back, just once, enough to see her standing behind the counter, small, strong, radiant in the golden bakery light. As he stepped out into the cool evening, he realized something simple and profound. Gossip couldn't touch what was real. What was real was the laughter of a boy drawing superheroes, the warmth of pie on a lonely night, and the quiet courage of two hearts learning to trust again. And for the first time since the whispers began, Caleb smiled not to hide, not to endure, but because he was proud. By summer, Maplewood had warmed into the kind of town that smelled like sunlight on wood and the faint sweetness of baking sugar. The whispers had quieted, replaced by the daily rhythm of footsteps and laughter outside the small shop, now bearing a new hand-painted sign. Sweet Grace, Bakery Warm Meals, Warm Hearts. Hannah stood on the sidewalk that morning, her apron tied neatly around her waist, looking up at the sign. Caleb had built the wooden frame himself, sturdy oak, sanded smooth, with letters painted by Lila, his 9-year-old daughter, who had insisted that the G should have sparkles. "It's perfect," Hannah said, brushing a streak of flour from her cheek. Caleb smiled. "So are you, when you're covered in flour." She laughed, shaking her head. "You sound like Tommy." "Then you're in good company." Inside, the new bakery buzzed with gentle life. Shelves lined with pies, cookies, and warm loaves filled the air with cinnamon and vanilla. The bell above the door chimed every few minutes, neighbors stopping by not just to buy bread, but to chat, to stay a while. Mrs. Patterson, the same woman who once whispered behind her back, was now a regular. She'd begun visiting every Tuesday for a slice of pie and some company. Mrs. Kim helped fold napkins in the afternoons. Even the pastor's wife had donated lace curtains for the front windows. Hannah moved easily behind the counter, her hands sure, her eyes bright. The tiredness that once shadowed her had faded, replaced by quiet confidence. Noah, now in 2nd grade, sat at the corner table doing homework, occasionally looking up to wave at customers. Lila sat beside him, showing him how to color within the lines. Caleb leaned against the doorframe, watching the scene unfold, the sound of Noah's laughter mixing with the clinking of teacups and the hum of conversation. "You did this," he said softly. Hannah turned from the counter. "We did this." He nodded, the corners of his mouth lifting. "Emily would have loved this place." Her gaze softened. "Sometimes, when I'm baking, I feel like she's here, like she's the one whispering what comes next." Caleb looked around the shop, the sunlight streaming through the lace curtains, the customers smiling, the way the air itself seemed to hum with something larger than luck. "Maybe she is," he said quietly. That afternoon, a young woman entered, her clothes worn, her eyes tired but kind. She hesitated by the door. Hannah wiped her hands and walked over. "Hi there. Can I help you?" The woman bit her lip. "I don't really have money. I just wanted to smell it. The bread." Hannah smiled, her chest tightening with recognition. "What's your name?" "Jess," she said shyly. "Me and my little brother, we've been staying at the shelter." Hannah didn't hesitate. She packed a loaf of bread and 2 cookies into a small paper bag and pressed it into her hands. "For you both. No charge." Jess's eye filled. "I can't." "Yes, you can," Hannah said firmly. "Someone once pulled out a chair for me when I needed it most. This is me passing it forward." From behind the counter, Caleb watched quietly. Jess left with tears on her cheeks and a bag of food in her arms. Hannah turned back, meeting his gaze. "What?" she asked. He shook his head, smiling softly. "Just proud of you." Her lips trembled slightly. "It feels right, Caleb. Helping like this, it feels like home." He nodded slowly. "That's because it is." As the sun dipped lower, the golden light poured through the window, landing on the old photograph that now hung above the counter, Emily's smiling face, framed neatly beside a hand-painted quote, "Kindness creates chains. One heart helps another, and another, until the world feels small enough to hold." Customers noticed it often, pausing to read it aloud. Hannah always smiled and said the same thing. "That's the reason this place exists." By closing time, the shop smelled of cooling bread and fading sugar. Hannah locked the door, turned off the lights, and stood with Caleb in the doorway, watching the street glow beneath the evening lamps. "Tomorrow," she said, "we start the donation table. Free meals for anyone who needs one." He nodded. "Emily's dream. Your hands." Hannah's eyes glimmered. "Our work." They stood side by side, the quiet hum of summer crickets filling the night air, both of them knowing this was only the beginning. The next morning dawned bright and cold, sunlight glinting off the last traces of frost on Maplewood sidewalks. A handwritten sign stood proudly on the bakery door, framed with pine branches and red ribbon. "Free meals today. If you're hungry, your family." By noon, the shop was full. The smell of warm soup, fresh bread, and apple pie drifted out into the street. Hannah moved from table to table, apron dusted with flour, greeting every guest by name when she could. Caleb worked beside her, carrying trays of food, his laughter echoing through the cozy space. The first to arrive was a veteran named Mr. Larson, who always sat alone at the diner. He shuffled in hesitantly, hat in hand. "Didn't bring cash," he muttered. Hannah smiled. "Then you're the perfect guest." She led him to a table and set down a steaming bowl of stew. Next came a young mother with a baby wrapped in an old blanket. Then 2 teenagers who'd been sleeping in the bus station. Then Mrs. Patterson, cheeks red from the cold, carrying a thermos of coffee and a basket of oranges. "I figured you might need a little help," she said shyly. "Always," Hannah replied, eyes glistening. Soon, every seat was full. The bakery buzzed with voices, spoons clinking, and laughter rising above it all. The people who once whispered now worked shoulder to shoulder, serving strangers as friends. Caleb stood behind the counter for a moment, taking it in the soft hum of conversation, the light dancing off the windows, Emily's photo glowing gently in the corner. Hannah caught his gaze and smiled. "You okay?" "More than okay," he said quietly. "You turned this place into something beautiful." She glanced around the room. "We did." Later, the mayor stopped by, shaking Caleb's hand firmly. "This is what Maplewood needs more of. You've built more than a bakery, you've rebuilt community." When the evening light turned golden, the last of the guests trickled out, waving thanks as they disappeared into the snow-dusted street. Hannah leaned against the counter, exhausted, her face still glowing with joy. "Do you realize," she said softly, "this started with one meal in a diner?" Caleb looked at her, voice gentle. "Yeah." One chair pulled out, and look where it led. She smiled, following his gaze toward Emily's photograph. "Kindness really does come back around." The sign outside swayed in the cool breeze, its painted words catching the lamplight. Sweet Grace Bakery, warm meals, warm hearts. Inside, Hannah, Caleb, Noah, and Lila sat together, sharing a last slice of pie. No one spoke for a while. They didn't need to. The warmth in the room said everything about hope, about love, about second chances found in the most ordinary of places. Snow fell softly over Maplewood, blanketing the rooftops and curling against the warm windows of Sweet Grace Bakery. Inside, the scent of roasted turkey, cinnamon, and apple pie filled the air. The little shop that had once been empty was alive with laughter, music, and light. Hannah moved quickly behind the counter, cheeks flushed from the oven's heat, her apron dusted with flour. "Table 7 needs more cocoa," she called. "On it," Caleb answered, balancing a tray with practiced ease. He wasn't just helping tonight, he was hosting. It was December 23rd, the bakery's first free Christmas dinner for anyone in town who needed a place to belong. 50 people had come, the homeless, the lonely, the elderly, families barely scraping by. Yet inside, no one felt like a guest. They felt like family. Mrs. Patterson ladled soup beside Mrs. Kim, who was humming a carol. Tommy Calder carried trays of bread from the back. Lila and Noah, dressed in matching red scarves, darted between tables handing out star-shaped cookies. Hannah paused a moment, watching the scene. Her eyes found Caleb across the room, sleeves rolled up, smile easy, a light in his face she hadn't seen before. Their eyes met. He nodded once, as if to say, "We did it." When everyone was seated, Hannah wiped her hands and walked to the front. Her voice trembled as she began. "A year ago, I walked into a diner with my son. We were cold, scared, and hungry. A stranger pulled out a chair for us. He didn't just give us a meal, he gave us hope." She turned toward Caleb, her smile breaking through tears. "Tonight, we want to do the same for all of you. You're not forgotten. You matter. Applause rippled through the room, soft and genuine. Caleb stepped forward then, his deep voice steady but thick with emotion. My wife, Emily, believed that kindness doesn't end, it passes from one person to the next. She used to say, one small act can start a chain you'll never see the end of. He looked at Hannah, then at the crowd. She was right, because her kindness reached me, and through Hannah, it reached all of you. There was a silence so full it felt sacred. Then the applause came again, louder, warmer, wrapping around them like the glow of the lights. Dinner went on for hours, plates emptied, laughter grew louder, carols floated through the room. Outside, the snow thickened, but no one hurried home. They lingered, talking, smiling, remembering that the world could still be kind. When the last guests had left, Caleb and Hannah stood at the doorway, the bakery quiet again. Lila and Noah had fallen asleep on the couch, heads resting against each other. Hannah looked at them, then at Caleb. Can you believe this? He smiled, voice low. I can now. She took a breath, her eyes shining in the soft light. Do you think she knows? He looked out the window, snowflakes drifting under the street lamp. Yeah, he said softly. I think she's smiling right now. They stood there together, side by side, as the world outside turned white. The sign above the door, warm meals, warm hearts, swayed gently in the wind, glowing like a promise. Caleb reached over, his hand finding Hannah's. She didn't pull away, and for the first time since Emily's passing, the empty chair in Caleb's life wasn't empty anymore. It was filled with laughter, with love, with the quiet, enduring warmth of found family. Because sometimes, the table we set for loneliness ends up feeding love instead. And the kindness we give away comes home to us at last. Sometimes, all it takes is a single act of kindness to change the course of a life. A man who once ate alone shared his table with a stranger, and that simple gesture built a new family, a new home, and a town that learned how to care again. For those of us who've lived long enough to know loss, we understand love, once given, always finds its way back. Like a porch light glowing through a cold winter night, compassion has a way of guiding lost souls home. Sweet Grace Bakery reminds us that love heals what grief breaks, and happiness grows when we open our hearts to others. Because no matter our age or mistakes, everyone deserves warmth, forgiveness, and a place at the table. So tonight, as you sit by the fire or sip your evening coffee, take a moment to remember, even the smallest kindness can light someone's way. If this story touched your heart, type 1" the comments. If not, or if you'd like to share your thoughts, press 0. And if you believe that kindness still matters, stay with us for more stories that warm the soul.